Hey, good evening, everyone. Hope you are well. May you please indicate on the chat if you can hear me? Thank you, Danielle. Just want to share my screen and we can get started. Okay, there's very few of you online, but I guess the time has been scheduled from 6 to 7, so I'm going to jump straight into what we are going to share or discuss or at least interact this evening, and I'll record the session to share and upload on ARC where your colleagues or classmates may access or find the information as well. Okay, so good evening again to all of you. Haven't touched base or seen many of you since last year. I hope that you are well and that you have made great progress with your work as we're about to find out. Please, there's very few of you, I think 6 or 7 of us online. Can this evening be an unmute discussion check-in? So please feel free to voice your opinion, to share where you are stuck or where you have a question. I think we'll have one more session before your final submission. And for that session, I'll ask you to come prepared with particular questions for where you are at. This evening is merely just a touch base on the various techniques in terms of research that you need to be wrapping your head around, and also just to find out where you are progressing and where, possible tips and tools we can start discussing as you progress. So I hope that you're well. I'll have a check-in shortly where I'll ask you to interact so I can get a sense of, where your head is at and where I can assist. Okay, so today is the research technique session that was shared with you from the campus side. I think it would be best if I use my clicker. Okay. So in essence, last year we went through the entire proposal steps and you had to put your whole proposal together, get ethical clearance, and now you are reworking or in the process of reworking the proposal into an actual submission for your summative mark. So we started with an introduction, which many of you already have, where you identified a problem, you set up research questions and an objective. You took a deep dive into literature to find out and have critical engagement with content and literature regarding your specific topic. You then would have started to look at the methodology. In your proposal, you just wrote what the methodology would be. And right now, you're at the step where the practical component for actually unpacking the methodology is about. So whether you're doing a qualitative study or a quantitative study, you would now be in the process of collecting that data. So I'm going to pause here for a second, stop sharing so I can just go back to the Teams chat and share a whiteboard link with you. I'm going to ask that you please click on that whiteboard link. It will take you to a live whiteboard chat where you will be able to share and answer my question, but it's just to tap in as to where you are at the moment in your research. So what you will see, I just want to go to the chat, see if I click on it, if it will take me there. Okay, so this is what you will see once you click on the chat. And if you click on a sticky note at the bottom, you will then be able to indicate and type more or less how far have you progressed to date. So you can just pop in and say, Dai, busy collecting my data. You can stick your sticky note anywhere on the chat, on the whiteboard, and just give me some insight as to more or less where are you progressing currently. And we'd all be able to see our chats live, so you can also get a sense as to where your teammates are at. And you can then, we can start our discussion. So I'm going to ask that you click on the link that I've provided in the chat. It will bring you to this particular screen. And just give me some context. Where are you at the moment? I'm going to pause for a second and just give each of you a chance to interact and just indicate where you are. Okay, thank you, Kifilwe. I see you're on it. You're busy sharing yours. Everybody else, there's a sticky notepad at the bottom. Please click on it and give us some insight as to where you're currently progressing. Okay, so there's six of you online. I'm going to give at least opportunity for minimum 3 people to share at least. Hope you will work with me so that we've got some data to speak to. So Bhavna, I saw you come and go there for a second. I hope that you're coming back to chat. Sure, hope that I'll see you on the chat box shortly. Daniel, I hope that you will share as well. I'll just give it a minute. If you're not putting it on the whiteboard, I assume that you want to talk to me, so then we'll ask for an unmute opportunity. But I'm hoping that you'll all get an opportunity to chat on the whiteboard. It's an open collaborative space where the idea is that we, as a team and as a collective, a class, more or less get to gauge where your teammates are at. Bhavna, I think your sticky note is a bit at the top. I'm going to try and pull it down. Thank you very much. I can see it now. Anybody else? Maybe you pasted yours where we are unable to view. Okay, nobody else. I'm going to wait for one more person. Please do cooperate. Thank you, Kifilwe and Bhavna. I appreciate your response. It doesn't have to be much. And if you haven't started or haven't progressed, that's also fine. You can just put that on the chat and say, still busy getting there, gathering my thoughts, still getting participants, still navigating through the space. It's just merely a check-in at the moment. Okay, I see a hand. Yes, Sure?
Evening, ma'am. We received this email as first years as well.
Is
So
there?
we have not started anything. I know I have my research proposal done because it's something that I've been doing for some time,
Okay.
but the others might not have anything because we have just started, but we have been invited to this thing as first years as well. So I'm not
Oh,
sure if you
okay.
are aware.
Okay. Thank you so much. No, I was not aware. The session in my planning was purely for the final year students who are completing their research project. And so this session will be recorded for new students who are merely stepping into the space and only going to take up this module a bit later. You're more than welcome to stay on if you just want to get a sense as to how your teammates have been progressing or what it would be like for you eventually when you get there. But this session is particularly targeted for the students who are finalizing the actual research projects and about to submit. So I wouldn't feel offense if any of the first year students would exit if you feel that this is going to be too much for you to consider now. But if you're more than welcome, if you'd like to stay, just to get a sense as to what it's, or a sense as to what's coming. But thank you for giving me context, Sure. I appreciate that. Um, okay, so from the students who are online, I'm going to go back to the chat just so I can get a sense as to who's with me. Please may you indicate on the chat, you can just say hi first year or hi second year so that I get a sense as to who's on this call. I assume Bhavna, Kifilwe, Vanessa, these are second year students who are finalizing their projects. But the rest of us on the call, not so familiar with the names. If you can indicate for me on the chat just so I can have a sense. Are you in your first year or in your final year of the actual project? So I'll just give for the normal chat on Teams, then I have a sense as to who's the audience this evening. And then for Vanessa, who just joined us, and any other second year, on the chat, if you scroll up a bit, you'll see a whiteboard link. Please click on the link. It's going to take you to a chat where we are busy sharing where we are currently in our um, projects. Lisimelo, I'm glad you are here. Please complete or keep in touch on the chat for us as well. Welcome. And then welcome to all the first year students as well. It's exciting to have you here because it will give you a glimpse of the bigger picture on what's coming. But again, as I said, I wouldn't take offense if a first year student would exit because it's positioned for the second year students who are finalizing their projects. Okay, so for the first year students who might not know me, I'm Diana Robertson, and I was the lecturer who picked up the research module in the second semester for the second year students to complete their research proposals. And so research proposals have been completed. They've gone through ethical clearance, and we are now at the write-up stage where they are speaking to the various participants and collecting the data to ultimately write up that final journey of the research project. To all the second year students, there is a link on the chat, but for the sake of time, I'm going to progress on, but you're more than welcome as this whiteboard will be shared later for discussion. So if you could please take a moment, and all the second year students, please indicate how far you've progressed thus far. So Kifilwe has indicated that she's completed the data collection phase. I'm giving you a virtual high five, and I'm super excited for the progress that you've made. And you're now engaging with the data analysis, which is probably the most tricky part of the journey. And now you're busy categorizing the themes in order for your final write-up or findings to be unpacked. So that's super exciting. Thank you, Kifilwe, for sharing, and well done. Uh, Pavna, your comment was there and it disappeared. Have you removed it? If you have, please put it back. I can refer at least to one more person's progress. We'll give you a second. But ideally, this exercise was to have a collaborative chat where we could indicate more or less where we are at. Let me just pause for a second. Decimelo and Vanessa, you have not completed it. Are you unable to see it, or are you just going to maybe add later on? You can chat with me on Teams or unmute. Are you able to see the whiteboard link?
I don't know. We can't. I can't see the link, and I think Lisimel is also saying the same thing.
Okay, I'll reshare it quickly.
Thank you.
Okay, it's been reshared on the chat. If you click on it, it will take you to our whiteboard. I'm going to give it one final round just so that we have more interaction on the chat to make this a productive evening. Okay, so I'm going to go back again. You're going to click on a sticky note at the bottom of the whiteboard, and then you're more than welcome to just give us some context where you are at the moment. And we will then unpack from these responses what the journey moving forward is going to be. While you're doing that, for the sake of the first year students that we have online, our student journey last year, we had 3 tasks that was compiled, which you will also um, undertake. And each task takes you through a chunk of the proposal steps to get you to the final step where our second year students are. So it's an entire proposal journey that you will go through and ultimately come up with a problem statement within higher education context. Your research problem can't be outside of the higher education context, but has to be based on a challenge that you've identified within higher education. And you will go through the proposal process and finally get to the third step where you have to, or your supervisor will be allocated to you, and your supervisor will defend your topic to the committee. And once approved, you will receive ethical clearance. And so this is where our second year students are currently. I see my second year students are a bit shy this evening. I only have Kifilwe online who's able to complete Okay, there's hope. I see one more student on. Bhavna, I don't know where you disappeared to. Hope you'll come back. And I'll give it a second, but I'm going to continue discussing. So the chat will be live for you to continue. Bhavna, I see your hand.
Hi.
Hi, be out. What happened?
So I'm actually a first year, not a second year. That's why my thing just kind of
Oh, then you
disappeared.
removed it. Oh, okay.
Yes.
No
Yes.
problem at all. Thank you so much.
No problem.
Okay. But I'll also engage with the first years in a bit just to ask your thoughts on what topics you are considering or where your head is at in terms of the research as well. Um, Ideally, the beginning chat was just to see where the second years have progressed to. Okay, so while the second years find their feet on the chat, I know it's a tricky whiteboard, new space to navigate through, and your arrows are going all over the place. It can become confusing, but keep at it. I'm going to come back and revisit this one more time before we close the session, just to be able to guide you based on where you are at. Okay. So back to our research structure, and I think for the first year students, this is more or less the journey that you'll undertake as you progress. So you are probably going to be at the introduction phase soon, where you'll discuss and identify and clarify what problem statement you're looking into. And those problem statements will be taken, or at least topics that you're considering will be taken, and a possible linked supervisor to that particular topic will be allocated. And then your journey will eventually kick off. Okay, so we've discussed how far we've progressed. Kifilo has made great progress in terms of already collecting data. So time is running out for those of us on the call who has not done it yet, and you'll be surprised how quick time escapes you. Before you know it, the deadline is around the corner, and then you shuffle and stress about putting all these components together. So my advice would be to use the time and every month make great strides and progress in your journey. And by those strides, I mean you are now at the methodology stage. You should be collecting data and you should be at the analysis stage similar to where Kifilwe is at. And if you are not, please push yourself to progress to that stage in order to have at least May as a month of writing up and doing the discussion phase where you start aligning your data that you've received, your themes that you've gathered with the specific research questions in order to answer those questions. So I'll take you through this a bit more in specific context. So for our first year students and our second year students, your last learning unit is learning unit 4. And this is probably, in my perspective, the most important learning unit. Here you are going to put your entire data together and unpack it so that you can write up an awesome research submission. And so we're going to walk through very quickly through these 5 LOs that we did cover last year. And this is merely just a summary for the sake of regrouping and getting our minds back into the research space. So for the students in our second year, the prescribed material still important. Chapters 15, 16, 17, 19, and 21 is what you should use as a guideline or checklist as you start finalizing or taking this last leap within the research journey. So I'm going to unpack these LOs one at a time, and I'll think I'll do it as I progress through um, the slides. So the first one is focused on where Kifilwe is at the moment. It's focused on that methodology component. It asks that you justify the best approach to analyzing the data for your study. And so I assume that Kifilwe's got a qualitative study, but you had the option, all of us, to have a qualitative or a quantitative study. I'm not too sure if there's any students who have a mixed method, which is both qualitative and quantitative. The students I'm supervising all have qualitative research studies. Data collection has then already been done, so you've all designed a data collection instrument for the data collection method that you've chosen. So if you chose a interview, you would have a questionnaire. If you chose a focus group, you'd have questions again. And so that questionnaire or questionnaire schedule, interview schedule would have been designed prior and would have gone through ethical clearance. So all of us who are in second year already have an instrument, so I'm not going to speak about the design that would have been approved at this point. What is key this evening is the consideration of data analysis. Please do put up a hand or just shout if there's anything that you want to pick up as I progress through. So data analysis is both different for quantitative and qualitative as discussed last year. If you are doing a quantitative study, then your data analysis would look more into statistical and numerical approaches and options in terms of descriptive statistics, where you identify patterns in the data you have collected, or it could be inferential statistics where you look for inferences that allows you to generalize your findings for a larger population. So generally, if you had a large uh, sample or participant sample, you would have opted for a quantitative data analysis. And here, you needed to consider any of these data analysis options as discussed and as prescripted in chapter 15 and 16, provides the objective of your study, suitable for a large sample, and it uses statistical significance. So those are students who are good with numbers and an interest in a quantitative approach. Common is qualitative, which the majority of students have generally alluded or leaned towards. Here you would have had various analysis methods that you could have used. The common ones that we find is generally a content analysis, where it's useful for analyzing documents or transcripts. You could also use it for narrative analysis that helps you understand the lived experiences of participants, or discourse analysis where it's focused on how language shapes meaning in communication. Again, reflect on the chapter in the textbook. By now you would have already selected perhaps a thematic analysis where you unpack various themes in the data that you've collected, which I think Kifilwe has selected for us. So ideally you would select a uh, analysis that fits with the research strategy that you've chosen, or the path that you've chosen. I'm going to move on into the findings section, and our second LO asks that you now present your findings of the data in relation to the research questions, taking into account the issues of quality and analyzing reporting data. So here, those key three words that come up, that's of something that you can't not consider throughout your write-up is it reliable? Is it valid? Is it trustworthy? And these are key themes that were embedded in the proposal, and these are key themes that you'll unpack and emphasize in your findings. And you could do this by considering three main tips that I'm giving you on this particular slide. The first one, align your findings with your research questions. And in order to do this explicitly is if you determine, I've got a wrong, let me just go back. Sorry about this. I just want to share. Okay, it's still the same. My note is incorrect on this particular slide. But basically, you have to take your research question. And for my students, I generally would say, put your heading as a research question at the top to show that the findings that you are unpacking fits within that particular question. So if you had three research questions, you would have three subsections for that particular question. So each question would have findings pertaining to that particular question. I hope this makes sense. Apologies for my typo on the slide. So in summary, if you have a specific primary question and you've got sub-questions that unpack it, please subdivide your data accordingly and put findings for each question to show that you're trying to answer each research question. It makes the recommendation section much easier because then you just take out core sentences from your findings to write up the last part. I hope that makes sense. I'll go to the chat in a bit. Let me just see. Okay, there's nothing on the chat. Please do unmute if I'm missing anything or if you're unable to see my screen as well. The next tip for the second years is to ensure quality in data analysis and reporting. So again, the quantitative and qualitative studies, we split the focus in terms of data analysis and ensuring quality. Now, your supervisors will guide you on this as well. But for me, quantitative studies should be focused, as per our textbook, primarily on reliability and validity. And qualitative studies lean towards unpacking trustworthiness. So, if you recall, reliability ensures consistency in the measurements across the different samples. Validity ensures that the study measures what it intends to measure. And then, in terms of trustworthiness, it has a whole subsection in the textbook that focuses on credibility, transferability. I think we unpacked it in the last slides that I shared, but dependability and confirmability. So in a qualitative study, those four key words that I just mentioned are key for you to touch on in your data analysis for qualitative. So I repeat, for quantitative study, make sure your emphasis is on reliability and validity. And for qualitative study, lean towards trustworthiness that unpacks those key four elements that I've just touched on. And then my last tip for you this evening in terms of your findings and your write-up, you will consider best practices for reporting your findings. So here, you will use direct quotes as your participants answer it in terms of a qualitative study. Those that will provide evidence for exactly what they have said, and you will put quotation marks around it. And you can also use tables and graphs in quantitative study to enhance clarity. In some students' work, they tend to use a graph to depict qualitative, but they will emphasize and say why that was necessary. But for mostly for qualitative, we will accept a quotation of a direct response. And for quantitative, we expect tables and graphs to display and to provide clarity. Then the next thing is to ensure neutrality, so avoid overgeneralizing and avoid showing bias or leaning towards a particular answer, but interpret the data for what it is and for what it is displaying to you. Then lastly, acknowledge the limitations in your study and reinforce transparency. So if there was a hiccup or a limitation, or you couldn't fully navigate with the data as much as you would have wanted to, then use that as a reporting as well for other researchers to learn from. So do not try to fix it or try to overanalyze it or try to make up responses for it. It's unethical to do that. Use what you have and write up exactly where your limitations are. You present your findings. It should be structured, well organized for a reader to follow. And whether you use reliability and validity in terms of quantitative, or whether you use trustworthiness in terms of qualitative criteria, quality control measures must be integrated to enhance credibility and scholarly rigor. So that's what your marker and supervisor will look for. I'm going to go to the chat just to see if there is any questions regarding the findings after my next slide. So LO3 asks that you write the discussion section. So Kifilwe, for example, is busy analyzing her data, and she might be using, um, let's say she's using Excel, which is generally the common tool that we use to split and put our themes in columns to just group our work together. But you can work in any way that's going to help you categorize the findings. In my own studies, when I started out, I used to print out the responses, cut them out, um, and stick them on a huge board in my study according to the categories, so that I could visually see and depict what my participants are saying and get to know the responses and the data that I found in order to make clear themes and correct analysis of my data. So you must find what will work for you and what's the best way to unpack it. And if using technology and Excel and various applications that are available works for you, then that's also a route you could take. Or if you are old school or just starting out and you want to use the most simplistic way to analyze your data, you should do what works for you. I've got a student who is creating mind maps to put it all together. Another uses AI tools to unpack and put it in particular categories. Whatever is safe and ethical and as clear for you to use and understand, use, and through the support of your supervisor, engage with what will work best. Okay, so LO3 asks, write a discussion that communicates the findings of your study in relation to the existing literature or models and where appropriate. I find that this is the fun part of it for me because you already have written up your literature. You've now coded your data, and it's a matter of finding what data from your findings fit with what is existing in literature and what data from your findings does not have literature that support it. And that will give you the gap in your study that you are finding, or probably a solution for or something unique that other scholars have not come up with yet. So this is the fun and exciting part, and I hope that you will get that validation as well when you get to writing up the findings. So number one, your key tip is the overview of your key findings. Summarize the main findings without repeating the raw data. So if you've put quotations of a response, you don't pull those quotations into the finding section again. Now you merely just unpack what your key findings were. And that's why I said it's easier if you have your research question at the top as a heading and you embed your findings within those underlined with each question in order to make this summary of the main findings more explicit and more clear. Interpretation of the finding, you will explain what your findings mean in context, and you will do that by comparing the literature, show how the findings align, or challenge past research. In our particular studies, we were not, it wasn't compulsory to have a theoretical framework, so I'm not going to focus on theoretical implications at the moment. But if you did use a lens or touch on it in your literature or in your, if you have a section for theoretical framework at all, let's say, for example, you decided to use, um, which framework can I go with? If you decided to use an activity theory framework as a lens, or you decided to use the technology acceptance model as a lens, then you would also be able to unpack your findings by looking at that TAM model, technology acceptance model, as a lens to look at your literature through. But I don't want to complicate it, so if you did not unpack that particular section, it's okay. It's not explicitly asked for in the rubric. Then the last one, the practical implications, all of you will write here. You will link it to real world applications. You will look at what is the implication in real life context in higher education institutions for this particular challenge that you've identified, and possibly come up with a solution or emphasize the limitations and then give recommendations for future research. So I'm going to stop here for a second and go to the chat just to see if you have any questions thus far. So I'm going to pause and ask in terms of let's start with data analysis. I'm going to put that on the chat. Second years, this is for you. You can just give me a thumbs up emoji if you are understanding that you needed to choose a particular data analysis approach to unpack your data once you are at that step, or will do it at that step. Just give me a thumbs up or ask a question, and then I'll go over to the findings discussion as well, just on the chat to ask you if you are okay. You are very quiet this evening, so I don't know, should I be nervous? Are you making progress? Have you started? I am hoping that you have. So data analysis, that section should be okay. Thanks, Kifilwe. Who else is on? Isimelo, are you good with the analysis? Anel, thank you so much. Nice to see you online. Vanessa, are you good with the data analysis part? Dianda, nice to see you. Welcome. Okay. So I think data analysis, you would have chosen a particular approach and you will just use that as a lens. Thematic analysis is the safest route to take. But if you've got content analysis or discourse analysis for qualitative, you're more than welcome. And so that's more or less the common ones, but you're more than welcome to explore with anything else that works for you. Okay, so then analysis is checked. Findings. In terms of the slide I just covered, where findings are concerned. So once you've got your finding, your key tool is to make sure that the findings are categorized in a way that answers your research questions. If you do that, you should be fine. Or you can structure it in any unique way as long as your research questions are being, it's alluded to it that your questions are being answered in order to make that final write-up at the end, to show the golden thread that you had these research questions in the beginning and this is how you've answered them in the end. So if you can follow that journey, you should be fine. May you please indicate on the chat for me, is the findings section clear? Thank you, Sianda. I see your thumb. Yes, Kifilwe, I'll make it available shortly. I don't have ARC access this semester. I think they're only giving access to lecturers who are actually lecturing, but I will share it with the head of education and ask her to load it on my behalf. And I will also load this recording on the YouTube channel and share that link as well. Okay, so the findings, as I said, most exciting part of the research. I hope you're not depleted and out of energy by the time you get there. But the very most exciting part for me of the entire journey. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the slides again. Don't worry, we're almost done. I don't have too much to say this evening in terms of this. May I ask any brave candidate that is able to indicate, are you able to see my slides?
Yes, we can see your slides,
Okay,
Diana.
thank you so much. Okay, so just to take a step back, the previous slides that I uploaded was without a correction that I've made. So I just want to share the correct ones. So as you can recall, we have discussed the various LOs. I covered LO 1 that speaks about analyzing the data. Number 2, your findings. And number 3, writing a discussion that communicates your findings. So lastly, we're going to touch on the limitations, delimitations, and recommendations section. We're going to look at the actual report in its entirety by looking at the rubric expectations, and then we'll call it, we'll end off the session. In my updated slides that I will share with the head of education, you will see that I've tried to put in applications that could have been useful as you navigate through it. So I don't know how far you are and which tools you've used. And to save time, I'll answer my own question, and I've put logos of various applications that are applicable for certain sections in your work. So for example, if you did data collection, to collect your data through a MS Teams platform like we are discussing or logging into now, it has an option to transcribe the conversation, which means it makes the final write-up and consolidation of your responses easier. All you have to obviously do is edit it because it has a tendency to put words or interpret accents very weirdly. But you would have had save time with the transcription tool that's available on MS Teams. Some of us would use Google Forms, which is easier also to download and pull Excel data that's easily accessible for you to now unpack and put and categorize and analyze accordingly. So to the first year students who are still online, these are available tools that you should keep in the back of your mind as you start. It will save you a lot of time, a lot of headache, and as well keep your information secure as well. Because the manual tendency, we tend to lose information quite a bit, or at least I do. SurveyMonkey is quite popular as well in collecting data if you wanted to consider alternative options. And a new one that I found quite interesting is Paperform. But these are just ways of collecting your data that could be suitable. So for those of us who are on the call who still has to start, perhaps due to time, find ways that make the data collection journey a bit easier. In quantitative study, generally students who I've worked with use SurveyMonkey and Google Forms, but there's various other statistic applications that you could also dive into, obviously under the guidance of your supervisor as well. To analyze your data, various institutions often introduce NVivo and Atlas TI. We have not done it at this level, but for those of you who probably have a another postgraduate qualification and you're familiar with these applications, don't be afraid to use them. Pull them in because they generally save time, and that's probably one of the challenges with doing research is the fact that it's so time consuming. So if you find applications and tools and tips that help you navigate through it successfully and smarter and quicker, not a shortcut to quality, but a support in terms of giving you the sufficient time to focus on elements where you need to unpack your writing a bit more and show your quality in your findings. Okay, so we've discussed the findings, we've discussed the write-up and what that should look like. We now at the limitations of the study, with LO4 asking us to focus on limitations, delimitations, and recommendations. With the limitations again, just to reiterate what we discussed last year, this refers to those uncontrollable factors that will affect the research scope, the accuracy, the generalizability. You have to consider what that is and refer back to the chapter in the textbook. But delimitations on the opposite side of it are the boundaries set by the researcher to narrow the study's focus. So you have to understand the distinction between the two in your own work. Which limitations or delimitations are controlled by you? Which ones did you put in place? Did you perhaps select a specific audience or participants for your study and did not include others? That is a delimitation that was in your control that you chose that way, or a limitation that's outside of your control that you can consider, maybe rules from the institution, availability and time of the participants. Whatever restricted you in any way outside of your control would be what you mentioned as limitations. Recommendations in the end for future research and practice, these are suggestions that give way to address your study's limitations, address um, extend your findings and apply them in real world settings. If you do consider these three elements, study, it must answer the limitations, extend your findings, and apply it to real world settings. It makes your study relevant for other researchers to tap into it, but as well as shows the relevance and the knowledge you're adding to the broader body of knowledge. And this should all be based on the study's conclusions and practical implications in the end. Then lastly, yellow 5 says synthesize the elements as well as the feedback into coherent and clear research report. So this is where all of us are in the end. You have received feedback throughout your proposal, and you're currently receiving feedback and support from your supervisor as you progress through the end or towards the end of your journey. That feedback constantly shapes your write up and constantly gives you the guidelines that you need to write effectively. So follow it in order to have a coherent write up, and you should be fine because your supervisor will see or perhaps support you to have a clear research report that allows us to find the golden thread and ultimately see that you've answered your research questions. Apart from that, you all received access to annexures, a lot of attachments that need to be part of the research submission in the end. These are everything that you've compiled thus far. It's also going to be the instruments that you are busy with using for data collection. It's going to be the transcriptions of the responses from your participants as well. But it's generally all the information that shows the commitment you've made to your research study. So I was informed that you have received access to this particular um, tab, and with all these resources have been shared with you. I'll check on the chat if you all have it. And then also you're guided by the referencing guide. You cannot write without considering the IIE reference guide, and by now you all are aware of that. Use it as your Bible throughout that final submission stages. And then I introduced or asked that you consider a reference manager. Again, it's just to save you time in terms of your references, to ensure that you are accurately referencing, but you're also not missing or leaving any of your references out or incorrectly referencing them at all. So not a must to use it, but just another tool that I wanted to include to help you consider easier ways to navigate through this. In conclusion, there is a summative rubric that we will be using to mark the work. Just to reiterate again, in task 1, 2, and 3, your own allocated supervisor marks those 3 tasks, but this final summative step is marked by an alternative supervisor. So your work will be shuffled and not marked by your supervisor again, unless that changes. The rule has been that a different supervisor with fresh eyes will be looking at your particular study. So this is a big deal because you've now written comfortably under the supervision of someone who knows you, who understands what you are trying to say. You now should take a step back and make sure that you're ticking all the boxes for the rubrics, that no matter who reads it, they get the same consensus as your supervisor has seen over the 3 tasks that you've given. So please, in closing, follow the rubric to the T. The headings that you need to use align with the rubric. The structure align with the rubric. The word count align with what the rubric requires. And if you're unclear, touch base with your supervisor or pop me an email just to get clarity on how you should put your work together. But based on your experience with your proposal, you all more or less have an idea what's coming and what's expected of you. So in terms of the overall introduction, there's going to be an abstract right at the front. After your content page, there'll be an abstract. This will give us a summary of everything in of your research project in one single page for us to see what you have summarized as a study. So if I read your abstract, I should have a clear idea what your entire study is about. You will then have a content page. You'll have a title page, a content page, an abstract, and your introduction will follow. You will then next have your literature review, your research approach and methodology that we just discussed, analysis of data and findings that we just discussed. You will have a conclusion and recommendations that we concluded with, and then you'll have a reference list. Bibliography, I'm not 100% sure of that, but I allude to or lean towards a reference list at all times. A reference list, in my understanding, refers to all the sources that you used in your write-up. They should be explicit in your reference list. Do not leave one out. Do not omit one and have it in an in-text but not in your reference list, or vice versa. Do not place a reference in your reference list that's not in your write-up. Consolidate and have exactly all your resources alphabetically listed for us to cross-check and see. And we often copy and paste your reference into a Google platform to see what the particular article said, to find or make the summaries that you've made to make those connections. So try not to, or at all, um, do not make up references or put meaning in an article that's not there. Just to safeguard yourself, because there's penalties that come with that, or it could be considered as plagiarism, and that's a different discussion for another day. Then the technical considerations, it's mostly embedded within the referencing as I've just discussed, but consider your language, consider using Grammarly or a tool that will help you check your grammar before you submit, because those small things do often get you penalized. So technical considerations you could get full marks for if you just pay attention to ensuring that your grammar and spelling is correct and that every reference is present, but also every annexure and attachment that's required is also included. So yeah, that's more or less what you need to do. So in closing, please do use the rubric as a guide, as a checklist in the end. Use your textbook to revisit topics or aspects that are still unclear. And I'm going to pause here and ask if there's any questions from your side or clarity that you still need before we end this session. So I'm going to go back to the chat to see you and just ask that I try to simplify what's coming, but you all have an idea prior to this already. So it's just a matter of understanding how to consolidate it for that final jump. If we use Grammarly, should we reference it also? Not necessarily Decimelo, but check with your supervisor if he or she prefers that you do. For my students, not so much. Grammarly does not add words to your particular write-up. So it's restructuring what you have written. So I'm not in particularly finicky about it, but check with your supervisor just for clarity on that. We continue with the same reference style we used last year. Yes, you do. The reference guide itself has been updated, Sianda. So there's a 2025 version of it. Ensure that you just double check um, based on what you need to change, if there is any that impacts yours. If you do see a lot of changes, then you need to adapt because we're going to use the current referencing guide. From what I've seen, it's not such a big shift, but if you are seeing a bit of a challenge, touch base with your supervisor to clarify. But we always, in my experience, support our students to use the most current version of the IIE reference guide. If an external marker would mark your work, that's the reference tool we would give them. Um, yeah. So yeah, just to answer your question, my advice would be use the current guide. If it's too much of your work that's going to change, touch base with your supervisor for clarity on that one. For my students online, we use the current version of the um, Harvard referencing guide for the IIE. First question, does the IIE have a specific research proposal template? It's not as much as a template, but it is a guideline. And you'll see once you start with the research project that you have 3 tasks that build up the template. So it forms a shape as you submit the task. It's almost like 3 ice tasks or 3 large ice tasks that you'll consolidate, and those will form the actual guideline for what the headings are. So it's not an actual explicit template that you receive upfront. It is something that you will put together or collate as you progress through. Can I unmute for another question, please? You're more than welcome.
Hi, ma'am. I just want to know another question from a first year.
Okay.
I just want to know, I have a specific topic in mind.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I've done this topic in my other studies as well because it's a topic that I quite am passionate about, but in other, how can I say, in other forms.
Okay.
And usually when I start with this topic, when you ask for assistance and you ask for participants, doors close and people are suddenly very busy.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so is it possible to have at the end of your research findings that I have asked 5 participants and they have all indicated that either they do not want to participate in the study, or
Yeah.
if they have participated, they have given only small amounts of
Mm-hmm.
information, or they were unavailable, or.
Yeah. Definitely. So in the limitation session, part of it that I mentioned. So that's where you'll say these are limitations that occur. It is beyond my control, but these are what restricts me from getting rich data that I can unpack because the participants would give limited responses or prefer not to participate in certain sections. So yes, in that delimitation and limitation section, we make provision for you to respond and share with us what was the challenges that you've experienced on your journey to collate your data. So there is definitely in the template room for you to unpack and explore that. Generally, before you even get to that section, as you work through the research proposal, you will be guided on how to navigate that differently because maybe there's ways to collect the data that will be in a sensitive way for them to respond. Maybe an approach we take could be different. But yes, the research journey takes you to a particular section in the write-up where you can say, this is what restricted me. This is the limitations I personally implement, and these are the limitations beyond my control. So yes, to answer your question, it's definitely possible. Is the problem if I change from online interviews to face-to-face interviews? Not at all. As long as you're still asking the questions that you intended in your ethical clearance instrument, you're more than welcome to go from face-to-face, from online to the face-to-face context. please do still ask permission to record the session. So as long as you're not changing the actual instrument, but you're changing the form of how you navigate it, I am confident that that is something you can do, and just keep the evidence as you would have done in the online space as well. In fact, it's easier to have face-to-face interviews than online. Um, Sometimes, in most cases where people find it easier to talk to you when you are physically with them. Is it possible to use the IIE as a participant? Yes. So what we do is, Surey, you'll get various annexures and forms that you will complete, and one of them is approval from the institution that you would like to ask for data collection. So there's a gatekeeper letter if you're asking an institution outside of the IIE, and there's also an ethical clearance process that you'll go through if you use one of the IIE's brands or campuses. So yes, you're definitely allowed to do it. There's no conflict at all. Okay, I see you're typing. I'm going to answer or just ask one more question for us to wrap up. So Anel, Sianda, Vanessa, Desimelo, and Kifilwe, is there anything you'd like to know or touch base on, or can you just give me an emoji on the chat to allow me to know that this evening was well received, you're on the same page, you're making progress? Just any response on the chat for the second year students, as the session was in particularly set up for your insight. Just the last round robin of where are you at, or any questions. Could just be a thumbs up, then I know you're still alive. I know you're cooking and feeding the kids and doing multitasking at this point, but I'm asking that you just give me uh, indication that you are with me and that you will reach out if there's anything that comes up. Thanks, Vanessa. Anel, I think I saw a thumbs up. Zianda, thank you very much. There you go. High five to you as well. You feel well? Not worried about you. You interacted earlier on, so I know you're making great progress. Okay, so for the most part, you are all good. I appreciate that. Bhavna and Surey from the first year side of things, thank you so much for staying on, for taking the time to gather as much insight on this journey as possible. I'm sure the second year students who are online could share with you that the more positioned and prepared you are, the better your outcomes of, and can be a tricky journey to navigate if you're unsure about the way forward. So thank you for taking the time to just hear what it's about in order to set yourself up for success in the future. And I wish you all the best. For the students who are in second year, I wish you all the best as well with the final last leap of your studies. I know that, or this particular module, I know that you're going to be successful and that you are all committing to the journey. I'm going to conclude with the last question. Any restrictions from the IIE side in terms of the research project? Surey, there's no restrictions as such as I would say, but there are rules and ethical considerations that are important to adhere to. And those ethical considerations will be shared with you in terms of an annexure. So there's forms that you need to complete, and the forms will guide you with what the do's and don'ts are of the process when you are using the IIE. For example, if you're going to use a varsity college or the central academic team of the IIE, or you're using a Rosebank college, they don't particularly like that we use the name of the institution. So one of the restrictions is we will speak of a private higher education institution instead of the actual name of the institution that you are using. So that's more or less restrictions and guidelines that will come. But when you receive the actual annexures that walk you through step-by-step journey of receiving ethical clearance, those will become more explicit for you to consider. I hope that answers your question. Um, okay, cool. Nosipo, I see you just joined us. We are concluding the session as it was from 6 till 7. I will share the recording as well with the head of education for the online center, and she'll share it on the ARC platform. You all have my email address. You're more than welcome at any point just to touch base and ask a question, or just to say, Dai, I've made progress. I'm so happy. I'm finally done. I'm popping champagne. I've done what I needed to do. You're more than welcome to share those progressive steps with me so I can celebrate with you as well. So once more, second years, you're on the brink of finishing. Keep going. I know it's exhausting. You've got multiple tasks and modules and jobs and side hustles and projects that you are dealing with. Take it one step at a time, and I wish you all the best. To the first years, thank you for your time and for tuning in and logging in. I hope this inspires you to approach the research smartly and to consider the bigger picture and time yourself in terms of what's coming. All the best to you. It is 7 o'clock on the dot. I want to have integrity with time, so I'm going to stop here. Have a blessed evening, everyone. And please reach out if you do need to speak to me. I'll pop my email on the chat for the first year students if they'd like to ask any additional questions. And I'll see you all soon in our final session that will be closer to the submission of this research project.